This is that Supro with a bag cap and a toasted resistor. And I spoke to the owner, and he never registered the warranty for this, and he'd like me to go ahead and fix it. So I'm going to try to do this more or less in real time for you. I'll speed up the bits that are tedious, and I'll mention the things that need to be mentioned as we go. And we'll get an elapsed time. So how long does it take to repair one of these? Starting the clock now-ish. There's felt on the back of this knob puller, so it's not going to scratch up the surface. And as I lever them out, I rotate the knob so we're not putting all the stress on just one part of the plastic. Some of them come off more easily than others, as you can tell. I didn't really have to use this part. None of these were that tight. I could have done them all with my fingers. That's part of the problem with these amps, and it'll be part of the solution I install before it goes home. Again, was never tight from the factory. These things are invaluable. That's not quite true. I think they're about $3 each. Just to reiterate, a Switchcraft style jack, this is not a Switchcraft, but it's that style open frame, should never be so loosely attached that you can remove it with a hand tool just using your fingers. You have to use the leverage that one of these gives you. All right, so that's all separated. That's all separated. This is just a matter of unzip tying some bits. All right. So that gives us freedom to access this board. And the next question is, can I pull this board out and up without undoing all this? We'll find out. Let's start by loosening the front jacks. Sorry, the front knob hardware, which again is all loose. It's like Supro almost had a nice amp here, but they just didn't really assemble it for you. Some assembly required is not a good standard when it comes to a new amplifier. And it's really hard to get that across to people unless they see it. I'm sure there's going to be someone saying that I went in here and loosened everything up before doing the video, because I have time in my life to take all the knobs off and loosen all the hardware and then put everything back and then stage a video. Now, this is like the fourth current production Supro I've had where all the hardware was loose. And in the case of these jacks without tooth washers, could never be tightened. Let's pull these preamp tubes. Let's see, 12X7 China. This vein ECC 81, so the 81 goes there between the reverb things. And 12X7 electroharmonics. Okay. So now it's a matter of removing screws, but I'm definitely going to have to undo some of these zip ties. And I'm not really able, let me move this gray card out of the way so it's not in the shot all the time for you. Sorry. I'm not really able to focus on what the monitor is seeing, what the camera is seeing as I do this. This is not going to be a long drawn out video, hopefully. But let me get all those screws out. Looks like a number 2 will fit. Yeah. Well, I'll give this to them. They have a lot of standoffs. While the rest of the hardware was not very firmly attached to the chassis. This board wasn't going anywhere. Any other hidden ones in there? And I'm happy to say that these screws that they used are somewhat ferrous, and that they will stick to a magnetized screwdriver bit like that. Because if these were stainless steel in these tight spaces down here, it can be really hard to get screws in and out because they just fall off. You can't reach your hand down in a space like that. And so it's nice when the screw sticks to the tool. All right, so now this pulls out just enough, right? Just enough. Come on, guys. Let's see if I have any slack here at all. The issue is right here by the IEC. Everything's very tight. I'm going to try to pull everything down and to the left. I may have to take the IEC out to do this, so it'll slide over to the right. Yeah, because this won't come back. I don't have any slack there. Sorry, I got to take this out. And the IEC connector is going into PEM nuts, so that's nice. Looks like a number 1 for those. Sometimes it's faster just to do 2 things by hand than to change bits on the power screwdriver. Plus, I don't know the strength of these screws. It's real easy to strip out when you're using a power tool, even when you have torque control and a lot of experience. With the black oxide screws, some of them are really made of soft metal, so some things it's best to do by hand. Let's see if that pulls out and gives me just enough slack. Ha 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 ha. All right, that's what I needed to be able to do this repair. Not pretty, but it works. All right, so here, let's see. Here's that big 5-watt, 560R resistor, output cathode. And there are the pads for the resistor that's bypassing it. I mean, not resistor, but capacitor that's blown up. So I need to remove that. And over here, R4 is very darkened in the middle. So I'm going to remove it and see what the value is. Okay. Turns out I could have done this from the top. The resistor leads are not going over at an angle. I could have done this from the top, but until you do this, you don't know, because if the leads had all been crimped over and bent, and I tried to do this from the top, it would just ripped up the pads and traces beneath. But since I have the board out, and I need to have the board out to get to that radial and change it properly anyway, this is for the best. So let's see if I can twist this so that I have upside down view. All right, this is better. All right. So now that I have access to the bottom of the board, I can see that that resistor, which is toasted, is a cathode. It's off the cathode. So that's an unbypassed cathode resistor. So it's pretty rare for a cathode resistor to burn like that. This is in the reverb driver stage, though. So depending on the value of that resistor, they might have done the 70s reverb driver trick from the 70s Fender, where instead of using like a 2.2K bypass with a 25 microfarad, they use like a 680 or 470 ohm. And that's when you get, that's the recipe for a toasted cathode resistor in a reverb driver. Anyway, like on other amps, even though this is lead-free solder, I add some fresh leaded solder to it, which introduces some flux. And that flux allows me to get the old solder to work nicely. And in this case, I'll just use this dental pick from the other side, hook it under the lead, heat up and pull down. And then I'll use my fingers, but it might get hot, so I'll use this screwdriver to get the other side. Just a moment, I will measure that resistor. Sometimes to get the old solder out, it helps to add a little bit of fresh. Again, adding a little bit of flux to it. Let me move this around. And here's the resistor, and here's the old capacitor. There's no obvious sign of leakage out of this capacitor. It is a 22 microfarad, 100 volt Rubicon. It should not have failed, and yet it has. Now I have a decision to make. I can put in another radial cap, just like factory, but that makes, if this were to fail again in the future, someone would have to pull this entire board to change out that cap. As these other caps seem to be fine and probably won't need to be changed, the Rubicon and Nishikon probably won't need to be changed for 15, 20 years. And all the other components that I see can be changed from the top side. Now, I know that going forward, and anyone who's working on one of these who finds this video will now know that you can change out the resistors from the top, which is very important to know. I think I should probably put in an axial electrolytic here where the radial used to be, because I've got solder points where I can do that. I could do it bridging across this resistor, or I could install a radial sideways, which is probably a better choice if I've got a 100 volt, 22 microfarad radial here. I'll check. I know I've got a whole bunch of 63 volts, which should be absolutely fine, though, for a cathode biased bypass cap on a single 6v6. I don't think it was a cap that was under voltage. I think it was a cap that had a severe failure condition. But anyway, either way, whether I do an axial across the points where the 5-watt resistor is connected, or whether I do a radial mounted at a 90-degree angle so it's bent over and accessible from the side and can be resoldered from the top in future, either one's going to be a better choice. And hopefully the new one won't go up in smoke. I won't be putting the old stock 6v6 back in. Let's see what this resistor driver resistor was, what the value is. Now, some people can read resistor band colors from across the room. I can barely read them at all. I'm red green colorblind, and it's much easier on a carbon film or a carbon composite than on a metal film. For some reason, all these colors look the same, especially when it's darkened. So let's see what the value measures. It's not going to be reading open yet. Huh. Measures 47K. That would be a very unusual value to use. And the band colors that I can see don't seem to line up with the 47K. Let me pop these through the color chart at DigiKey and see what it tells me. Well, no, it's a 5-band resistor. It's a 1% 470K. So it has not moved. That's a really odd value to use on a cathode, though. So, oh well. Let me just confirm that that's the cathode. Yep. Pin 8, so 470K cathode unbypassed. And it went up in smoke. Huh. Anyway, I've got some 470Ks. I think I've got a 2-watt. Let me see my stash. Well, skipping ahead a bit. 2-watt leads are too thick to fit. This is a 1-watt metal oxide. If this cathode burns up a 1-watt metal oxide mounted slightly elevated off the board, there's a bigger problem. Those look good. I'm not bending them over, so if this does need to be replaced again, it can be done from the top side. Just in case there's a problem with the circuit design. Sure would be nice if there were schematics for these things. I don't like operating blind, and given the value of the amp, it's not worth me going through and figuring everything out and reverse engineering it. I will clean up that solder flux in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and change out this cap. And I'll show you, hopefully you'll see what I mean about doing it from the top. So go ahead and cut the leads a little bit short so I don't have to push too much down. Let's see if I can do this. Sometimes it's nice to have 3 hands to put these in things. All right, so I've got it lined up. Got some fresh solder there at the negative connection. Making sure I don't touch and melt this quick connect next to it. All right, right there. Is it as pretty as having it topside like these others? No, but should there be a systemic failure, something else wrong with this amp, and this one blows up too, it's easy to change it out without pulling the entire board again. That's the trouble with amps like this, is that I knew this resistor was bad, I knew this cap was bad, probably this 6V6 was bad. I changed these out, I'll put in a different 6V6, but to test it, I've got to put it all the way together before I can power it up. And if there's something else wrong, I've got to take it all the way apart again, and the whole process starts all over. It's kind of frustrating not to be able to test as you go. Anyway, I need to trim some leads from the other side and clean up some flux. It's a bit ironic considering I have a very different looking resistor here than the others, and I've got a radial mounted on its side. But in general, I like to leave amps at least as good as new and factory looking as I found them. And the only reason I'm not making it look invisible, as I want to be able to change these easily, should I need to, without pulling this apart again. And I wanted to mount this resistor up top, and I didn't want to make this whole thing wait while I ordered a 5-band blue metal film, when this metal oxide works just fine for a cathode. Anyway, let me put this back together. That'll give the isopropyl time to dry, and then we'll see if all this did the trick. All right, let's start putting this back together. That is a massive upgrade that I'm putting in here. After using this, I cannot make these loosen up with my fingers. That's the goal. These will not come loose. Something frustrating I didn't realize when I was taking it apart. These multi-pin connectors, some of the connector housings came off the board there and there. It's fine. It's not soldered in place. It's just they're just supposed to stay on the board. It's just not a sign of great quality components. Usually these prongs stick to these things, not to anyway. Let's put it back together, make it all work. All right, master volume off, reverb off, bass and treble. Let's put them to noon. Gain off. Let's try this Groove Tube 6v6. Make sure I don't have any magic smoke. Let me hook up an IC cable and a speaker and all that fun stuff. All right, I got this thing ready to go. And it's connected to my light bulb limiter. Apply power. So far, so okay. Take it out of standby, fingers crossed. No big surge of current. I hear my Wi-Fi router coming through. I'll take some voltage measurements in a minute. Let's make sure we're getting a normal signal to it. This video was primarily on how involved it was to change out two components on a build like this. One capacitor, one resistor. Now that I know that this can be worked from the top, this makes it easier going forward. But radial replacements, it's still good to pull the board when you can. And I got everything connected correctly. That's nice. I got to bundle everything up, take some voltage measurements, and let this run for a good long while and make sure that the new cap's not going to blow up for some reason. But I think that's where this video will end. Thanks for bearing with me. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.